The ancient tablet wasn't supposed to exist, yet there it lay among the forgotten relics of humanity's first cities, its surface etched with impossible precision. The symbols carved into its clay surface weren't mere pictographs. They were celestial coordinates, mathematical constants, orbital patterns that shouldn't have been understood for thousands of years. They said the first kings of Earth ruled for 241,000 years. Historians called it myth, until someone found their names carved in stone alongside astronomical patterns that match our modern understanding of cosmic cycles. The Sumerians, those first masters of writing, law, and architecture, left behind more than cities. They left riddles in clay and stone, riddles about visitors from beyond the stars they called Anunnaki, those who came from heaven to earth. But the greatest riddle was discovered just last year. A fragmented tablet excavated near ancient Eridu contains coordinates and orbital calculations that seem to describe an object moving through our solar system on a hyperbolic path, a visitor from interstellar space. The calculations precisely match the trajectory of 3I Atlas, the comet-like object currently approaching our inner solar system. How could scribes from 5,000 years ago predict the arrival of an interstellar visitor in 2025? Unless the gods they worshipped weren't gods at all, but something far more profound. What if reality itself is the oldest illusion? Standing amid the wind-swept ruins of Eridu, the world's first city, archaeologists felt the weight of 6 millennia pressing down upon them. The excavation had been routine until they discovered the underground chamber, a repository of knowledge deliberately sealed and protected from the ravages of time and conquest. The Sumerians emerged in Mesopotamia around 4500 BCE, building the foundation of human civilization between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. They invented writing, complex mathematics, astronomy, and the first systematic observations of the heavens. Their priests tracked the movements of celestial bodies with remarkable precision, recording everything on clay tablets that hardened into time-resistant archives. When the first translators began deciphering the newly discovered cache, they encountered astronomical terminology unlike anything in previous Sumerian texts. The cuneiform spoke of the wanderer that returns not from its path, and the messenger from the realm beyond the birth waters of the gods. The calculations inscribed alongside these passages weren't recognized as orbital mechanics until a physicist joined the team. The equations described an object moving through space following a hyperbolic trajectory, the signature of an interstellar visitor, rather than a solar system native. The physicist immediately recognized similarities to the path of 3I Atlas, the mysterious object detected by modern telescopes in 2023, now approaching our inner solar system with increasing speed. When the translation team finally pieced together the fragments, they found something even more disturbing: specific dates. Using the Sumerian calendar and astronomical reference points, they converted the ancient timeline to our modern calendar. The tablet predicted 3I Atlas would reach perihelion, its closest approach to our sun, on October 29, 2025, tomorrow. Even more puzzling were the symbols surrounding this prediction. They weren't prayers or omens, but something that resembled code, a mathematical sequence that seemed to describe not just the object's path, but its purpose. For the Sumerians, this wasn't just an astronomical curiosity. It was the return of something that had been here before, something their ancestors had encoded into their most sacred texts as a warning, or an invitation. What secret lay hidden in the ancient calculations that connected humanity's first civilization with a visitor from beyond our solar system? The first team of researchers who examined the tablet's predictions were skeptical. Ancient civilizations had been making astronomical observations for millennia. Perhaps the Sumerians had simply recognized a recurring celestial pattern. But 3I Atlas wasn't recurring. All evidence indicated this was its first and only journey through our solar system. Dr. Elena Katsaros, the lead archaeoastronomer, spent months cross-referencing the tablet's calculations with other Sumerian astronomical texts. What she found defied conventional explanation. The Sumerians didn't just predict this object's arrival, she explained in her research notes. They described its composition. The tablet mentions the visitor clothed in the breath of life and the waters of creation, an eerily accurate description of the carbon dioxide and water vapor now observed streaming from 3I Atlas as it approaches the sun. But the mystery deepened when the research team discovered references to the same interstellar visitor in texts from the sacred library of Ashurbanipal, dating nearly 2,000 years after the original Sumerian predictions. The Watcher returns when the veil grows thin, read one passage. The seed of consciousness carried on wings of dust across the great void. The implications were staggering. Either these ancient civilizations possessed astronomical knowledge thousands of years ahead of their time, or they had obtained this information from another source. Perhaps the very gods they claimed descended from the stars. The Anunnaki, the name given to these beings in Sumerian texts, were described as creators who fashioned humans from clay and breathed life into them. Modern interpretations had dismissed these accounts as creation myths, but what if they were something else entirely? Hidden among the astronomical calculations were references to something the Sumerians called me, usually translated as divine powers or attributes. But in the context of the newfound tablets, linguists began questioning this interpretation. The ME aren't simply divine powers, proposed Dr. Samir Patel, an expert in ancient languages. The term more accurately translates as templates or programs. The texts describe the Anunnaki using these ME to shape the substance of creation and determine the nature of all things. This revelation sent shockwaves through the academic community. Some scholars suggested the ancient Sumerians might have been describing what we would now call a simulation or programmed reality. The universe is a vast construct of code and consciousness. Further evidence emerged when cryptographers analyzed the mathematical sequences surrounding the prediction of 3i Atlas. The numbers followed patterns remarkably similar to modern encryption algorithms, suggesting they weren't just calculations, but a form of encoded message. When partial sequences were processed through quantum computing systems, they generated three-dimensional models resembling DNA structures, but with significant differences from any known terrestrial life form. It's as if the tablet contains both the prediction of this interstellar visitor and instructions for decoding some kind of message it carries, noted Dr. Katsaros in her classified report. As telescopes around the world tracked 3i Atlas's approach, anomalous behavior further confirmed the ancient predictions. The object wasn't just following the trajectory described in the Sumerian tablets, it was changing course slightly, releasing precisely timed bursts of material that defied explanation by natural processes. The most troubling discovery came when researchers found a passage describing what would happen when 3i Atlas reached its closest approach to Earth. The messenger will cast its shadow upon the Earth, and those with eyes to see will witness the truth of their making. The code of creation shall be revealed, and the illusion of separateness will dissolve like mist under the rising sun. This wasn't merely astronomical observation. It was prophecy, a foretelling of awakening or revelation connected to this cosmic visitor. As news of these discoveries spread among specialized academic circles, efforts to suppress the information began. University funding was quietly withdrawn. Key researchers found themselves reassigned. Government agencies suddenly expressed interest in what had previously been considered esoteric archaeological research. Why would ancient astronomical observations trigger such modern concern? What forbidden knowledge lay encoded in those clay tablets that powerful institutions would seek to control it? And most disturbing of all, what would happen tomorrow when 3i Atlas reached its closest approach to our world, precisely as predicted by scribes who lived before the invention of the telescope? As word of the discovery spread through unofficial channels, the academic world fractured. Mainstream archaeologists dismissed the findings as coincidence or mistranslation. How could ancient Sumerians, peering at the night sky with naked eyes, possibly predict the arrival of an interstellar object 5 millennia later? Their explanation was simple. Modern researchers were projecting contemporary knowledge onto fragmentary ancient texts, but a growing contingent of scholars from diverse fields, astronomy, linguistics, physics, and theology, saw connections too precise to dismiss. The Sumerian calculations didn't just approximate 3i Atlas's trajectory, they matched it with mathematical precision that bordered on impossible. Dr. Katsaros found herself caught between these worlds, her reputation at stake. The evidence demands we consider possibilities outside conventional historical frameworks, she argued during a contentious faculty meeting. Either the Sumerians possessed observational technologies we've never discovered, or they acquired this knowledge from elsewhere. Her colleague's response was swift and severe. This is how careers end. One senior professor warned her privately. Chasing ancient astronauts and simulation theories. There are always naturalistic explanations. But were there? As 3I Atlas approached, its behavior grew increasingly anomalous. The object began emitting structured radio pulses. Not the random noise of natural processes, but patterned signals that resembled the mathematical sequences found on the Sumerian tablets. When this news leaked to the public, authorities quickly attributed the signals to interference from Earth-based transmissions, reflecting off the object's surface. Few were convinced by this explanation. Meanwhile, in a secured laboratory beneath the British Museum, linguists and cryptographers continued their analysis of the tablet fragments. The ancient text described the Anunnaki not merely as gods, but as shapers of the seen and unseen, beings who existed between the world of forms and the realm of potential. The Sumerians appear to describe reality itself as a construct, explained Dr. Patel in his suppressed research paper. They didn't possess our scientific terminology, but their concepts align remarkably with certain interpretations of quantum mechanics. The universe as information, consciousness as fundamental rather than emergent. The tablet spoke of the ME, the divine programs, as tools the Anunnaki used to weave the illusion of separation and bind consciousness to form. According to the texts, these beings existed primarily in a state the Sumerians called Nam, roughly translated as potential or probability, and could manifest in physical form only by narrowing their existence through the application of ME. Most disturbing was a recurring phrase: the binding weakens when the messenger passes near. As the global scientific community tracked 3I Atlas's approach, unexplained phenomena began occurring worldwide. Quantum experiments reported results that defied established laws of physics. The double-slit experiment, a cornerstone of quantum mechanics, showing how particles behave like waves when not observed, began producing results suggesting observation was no longer collapsing wave functions as expected. Reality itself seemed to be behaving less reliably. Across different cultures and spiritual traditions, practitioners reported similar visions during meditation or prayer, geometric patterns matching those found on the Sumerian tablets, and a sense of something vast awakening from cosmic slumber. The conflict between scientific materialism and these inexplicable experiences created deepening social tension. Those reporting unusual perceptions were dismissed as hysterical or delusional, yet their numbers grew as 3I Atlas approached. Government agencies monitored these developments with increasing concern. Internal documents, later leaked, revealed official assessment that mass psychological phenomena could trigger social instability. Yet the classified sections of these same reports acknowledged the possibility that something genuinely unprecedented was occurring. In the remote deserts of southern Iraq, at the original excavation site near ancient Eridu, researchers discovered something that definitively connected the Sumerians to 3I Atlas. Beneath the foundation of a temple dedicated to Enki, the Anunnaki god of wisdom and creation, they found a sealed chamber containing a single artifact, a crystalline object whose molecular structure defied analysis. When exposed to specific frequencies of light, the crystal projected a three-dimensional image of our solar system, showing the trajectory of 3I Atlas and highlighting its point of closest approach to Earth. Carbon dating placed the chamber's construction at approximately 3200 BCE. "This is not primitive astronomy," whispered one researcher as they documented the find. "This is technology we barely understand even now." The crystal was immediately confiscated by authorities and transported to an undisclosed location. The excavation was closed, the site restricted under the pretense of regional instability. But images had already been transmitted. The world had seen evidence that could not be easily explained away. As 3I Atlas continued its approach, its luminosity unexpectedly increased. The object was now visible to the naked eye, a blue-green smudge against the night sky growing brighter with each passing hour. Spectroscopic analysis revealed increasing emissions of complex organic compounds similar to the precursors of life. In the final hours before closest approach, researchers made one last breakthrough in translating the Sumerian prophecy. When the messenger passes through the veil, eyes will open that have been closed since the binding. The children of clay will remember their shaping. The illusion will tremble like water disturbed by stone. The tablet's final inscription was perhaps the most chilling. The gods return not in form, but in awareness. The binding loosens. The simulation falters. What was programmed awakens. As dawn broke on October 29, 2025, humanity stood at the threshold of either scientific revelation or collective delusion. In less than 12 hours, 3I Atlas would reach its closest point to Earth. Would the world witness merely an astronomical event, or would reality itself reveal its deeper nature? And if the ancient prophecies proved accurate, what would it mean for our understanding of consciousness, existence, and the very fabric of what we call real? The boundary between science and mysticism had never seemed so thin. As 3I Atlas reached perihelion, observatories worldwide trained every instrument on the interstellar visitor. The object's luminosity continued to increase beyond all scientific predictions, its azure glow now clearly visible even in daylight. Spectroscopic readings detected complex organic molecules spiraling outward in structured patterns that defied random distribution. These weren't the chaotic emissions of a natural body, but something that appeared deliberately engineered. At precisely 3:33 p.m. UTC, the exact moment predicted in the Sumerian tablets, 3I Atlas released a massive burst of energy across multiple wavelengths. The electromagnetic pulse temporarily disrupted communications worldwide, but caused no permanent damage. When systems came back online, astronomers made a stunning discovery. The object had shed its outer layer, revealing a geometrically perfect dodecahedron at its core. "It's impossible," whispered Dr. Katsaros as she studied the telescope feeds. "Natural objects don't form perfect platonic solids." Meanwhile, the crystalline artifact recovered from Eridu began emitting the same frequency signature as 3I Atlas. Scientists monitoring the object reported that its molecular structure was rearranging itself, transforming from a seemingly inert crystal into something resembling a three-dimensional circuit. The connection between the ancient Sumerian artifact and the interstellar visitor could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Something had activated a technology dormant for thousands of years. As data poured in from observatories worldwide, researchers noticed another anomaly: quantum random number generators, devices that produce truly random numbers based on quantum fluctuations, suddenly began generating non-random sequences. The patterns matched the mathematical code found on the Sumerian tablets. Dr. Eliza Morales, a quantum physicist consulting on the project, recognized the significance immediately. "Random number generation is the foundation of what we consider objective reality," she explained to the research team. "True randomness is what prevents the universe from being deterministic, from being a program. These patterns suggest something is interfering with fundamental quantum processes." In a classified facility, linguists completed the full translation of the tablet sections describing the Anunnaki's creation of humanity. What they found wasn't a primitive creation myth, but a sophisticated explanation of consciousness engineering. "The text doesn't describe gods creating humans from clay in a literal sense," Dr. Patel reported. "It describes the binding of consciousness to matter through information encoding, what we might call programming. The clay is a metaphor for the physical substrate, while the breath of life refers to consciousness itself." According to the translation, the Anunnaki created human consciousness as an experiment, a way to experience individual perception within the unified field of awareness they naturally inhabited. They created the ME, described as templates of perception, to structure how consciousness would experience physical reality. Most shocking was the tablet's description of the purpose behind this creation: to know separation, that they might more deeply know unity; to forget godhood, that they might remember it anew. The implications were profound. The Sumerian texts weren't describing alien visitors creating human slaves, as some ancient astronaut theorists had proposed. They were describing consciousness itself creating vehicles for individualized experience, a voluntary fragmentation of unified awareness into separate perspectives. And 3I Atlas, according to the texts, was a periodic trigger for remembrance, a cosmic alarm clock designed to awaken dormant awareness when the time was right. As this information circulated among researchers, reports began coming in of widespread psychological phenomena. People across different cultures, ages, and backgrounds described experiencing moments of expanded perception, briefly seeing through what they described as the veil to glimpse a more fundamental level of reality. Medical facilities reported patients with no history of seizures suddenly displaying unusual brain activity, their neural patterns synchronizing across vast distances in ways that shouldn't be possible without direct connection. Dr. Morales proposed a controversial hypothesis. If consciousness is fundamental rather than emergent from brain activity, and if that consciousness is structured by information patterns, as the Sumerian texts suggest, then 3i Atlas might be altering those patterns, changing the programming that shapes our perception of reality. The evidence supporting this outlandish theory continued mounting. The dodecahedral structure at the core of 3i Atlas began rotating, each of its 12 faces emitting light at different frequencies. Analysis revealed these frequencies corresponded to specific neural oscillation patterns in the human brain: alpha, beta, theta, delta, and previously unrecorded states. Most compelling was the discovery made by Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka, a geneticist who had been studying the impact of 3i Atlas's emissions on biological systems. He identified unusual activity in what had previously been dismissed as junk DNA, non-coding regions of the human genome that comprise over 98% of our genetic material. These non-coding regions are showing signs of activation, he reported. They contain sequences that appear to be responding to the frequencies emitted by 3i Atlas. It's as if they were designed to activate when exposed to these specific stimuli. Further analysis revealed something even more astonishing. Portions of this non-coding DNA contained mathematical sequences identical to those found on the Sumerian tablets and in the emissions from 3i Atlas. The same code existed in our genes, in ancient clay, and in an object from interstellar space. As Dr. Tanaka expanded his investigation to include genetic samples from various species, he found the same sequences present throughout Earth's biosphere, in plants, animals, fungi, even bacteria. The code wasn't unique to humans. It was embedded in all life on Earth. This isn't just in our DNA, he concluded in his report. It's in the DNA of everything. The code isn't part of life. Life is built around the code. These revelations forced researchers to consider a possibility that would have been dismissed as mystical nonsense months earlier. The universe, or at least our perception of it, might be structured by information patterns that existed before humanity, before Earth, perhaps before what we understand as time itself. The Sumerians hadn't been describing primitive gods or alien visitors. They had been preserving knowledge of the fundamental nature of consciousness and reality, knowledge that humanity wasn't supposed to have forgotten. As 3i Atlas began to move away from its closest approach, its emissions changed frequency again. The crystal from Eridu responded by projecting new images, not of celestial bodies this time, but of geometric structures that seem to exist in more dimensions than the three we perceive. Dr. Katsaros recognized these projections from her study of ancient mystical traditions. These are the same forms described in texts from traditions worldwide: the Platonic solids, the flower of life, the Sri Yantra. Sacred geometry isn't just symbolic. It appears to be literally the architecture of reality. The connection between ancient knowledge and cosmic phenomena continued strengthening. Researchers analyzing megalithic sites around the world, from Göbekli Tepe to the pyramids, from Stonehenge to the temples of Angkor, discovered they all encoded the same mathematical relationships found in the Sumerian tablets and 3i Atlas's emissions. Humanity's ancient monuments weren't just observatories or temples. They were receivers and transmitters designed to interact with something beyond our normal perception. But as these revelations accumulated, a deeper question emerged. If reality itself is a construct shaped by information patterns, who or what created those patterns? Were the Anunnaki themselves merely higher-level expressions of consciousness within an even greater system? And perhaps most troubling, if the illusion, or binding that structured human perception was indeed weakening due to 3i Atlas's passage, what would humanity become if that binding dissolved completely? The Sumerian texts offered a cryptic warning. When the children remember their creation, the Creator also remembers. Awakening flows in both directions across the veil. Something greater than humanity was stirring in response to our growing awareness. Something that had been waiting for this moment since before recorded history began. In the weeks following 3i Atlas's closest approach, a strange calm settled over humanity. The interstellar visitor continued its journey outward. its emissions gradually fading but not disappearing. The crystalline artifact from Eridu remained active, pulsing with light in rhythm with the distant object, as if maintaining a conversation across the void. Scientists, theologians, and philosophers struggled to integrate what had been discovered. The evidence suggested a universe fundamentally different from what modern science had conceived. Not a mechanistic system of matter and energy, but an informational construct where consciousness played a central role in shaping reality itself. The ancient Sumerians hadn't been primitive people creating myths to explain natural phenomena. They had been the custodians of profound knowledge, an understanding of reality that humanity had somehow forgotten as civilization advanced. The irony is breathtaking, reflected one philosopher in a widely shared essay. We've spent millennia progressing from what we considered superstition toward scientific materialism, only to discover that the oldest written knowledge on Earth might contain deeper truths about consciousness and reality than our modern frameworks. The mysterious junk DNA sequences continued activating in people worldwide, though the effects varied dramatically between individuals. Some reported expanded awareness and perception. Others experienced nothing unusual. Medical researchers observed that these differences correlated with specific neural patterns, as if some brains were more receptive to the awakening than others. Perhaps most significantly, the barrier between scientific and spiritual worldviews began dissolving. Quantum physicists found themselves in dialogue with meditation masters. Neuroscientists consulted ancient texts for insights into consciousness. The Sumerian understanding of reality as an informational construct, the universe as a form of code, provided a framework where both perspectives could find common ground. The revelation that consciousness might be fundamental rather than emergent from brain activity transformed humanity's self-perception. If awareness wasn't produced by neural activity but rather channeled or constrained by it, then consciousness might exist independent of physical form, persisting beyond death, perhaps existing before birth. We've been asking the wrong questions, observed Dr. Morales in her address to the Emergency Scientific Summit. Not how does matter produce consciousness, but how does consciousness create the experience of matter? The Anunnaki weren't gods or aliens. They were aspects of consciousness itself, creating vehicles for individualized experience. Ancient stories of creation suddenly appeared in a new light, not as primitive attempts to explain origins, but as metaphorical descriptions of how unified consciousness fragmented itself into separate perspectives. The forbidden fruit in Eden became a symbol for the knowledge of separation. The Tower of Babel represented not linguistic confusion, but the fracturing of unified awareness into seeming independence. Yet questions remained. If reality was indeed a construct, a simulation of sorts, what lay beyond it? If the Anunnaki were expressions of higher-level consciousness, what was the nature of that greater awareness? And what would happen to humanity as the ancient binding continued to weaken? The Sumerian texts offered tantalizing hints. They spoke of cycles of forgetting and remembering, of consciousness repeatedly binding itself to form and later awakening to its true nature. 3i Atlas wasn't the cause of an awakening, merely its herald, a cosmic timekeeper triggering a process encoded in the fabric of life itself. As humanity stood at this threshold of perception, individuals made different choices. Some embraced the expanded awareness, practicing ancient techniques described in texts worldwide for navigating altered states of consciousness. Others resisted, clinging to familiar materialist frameworks that felt safer, more defined. Neither approach was wrong, merely different paths on the same journey. Perhaps the most profound insight came from a previously overlooked fragment of Sumerian text, finally translated 3 weeks after 3 Atlas began its departure. The purpose of forgetting is the joy of remembering. The purpose of separation is the bliss of reunion. The children of clay were never separate from their source, only dreaming they were alone. As humanity absorbed these revelations, a deeper understanding emerged. This awakening wasn't an ending, but a beginning. The journey of 3 Atlas through our solar system marked not an end, but a beginning. The first note in a symphony of awakening that continues to resonate through human consciousness. As the interstellar visitor recedes into the cosmic distance, its message encoded in our very DNA has only begun to unfold. Researchers studying the Sumerian tablets discovered one final inscription, hidden within a mathematical sequence that had initially been misinterpreted. The message was deceptively simple. Reality is code. Code requires a coder. This profound statement echoes across the millennia, challenging our most fundamental assumptions about existence. If reality is indeed an informational construct, a vast cosmic simulation of sorts, then something or someone had to write that initial program, establish those first parameters of existence. The ancient Sumerians suggested the Anunnaki created humanity, but they also hinted at something beyond even these beings, a source from which all consciousness emerges and to which all eventually returns. The gods themselves were programmed, their divine nature simply a higher-level expression of the same awareness that flows through humanity. Perhaps most intriguing is the possibility that this cosmic program continues evolving. Each awakening of consciousness, each recognition of the underlying unity behind apparent separation, adds new complexity to the system. We are not merely experiencing reality, we are participating in its ongoing creation. As individuals and as a species, humanity stands at a crossroads of perception. The veil has thinned, revealing glimpses of a reality far more profound and interconnected than our everyday awareness suggests. Some will choose to look deeper, others will turn away. Both choices are valid expressions of consciousness exploring itself. The ancient Sumerians left us with one final paradox to contemplate. If the gods created reality as we know it, who or what created the gods? And if consciousness itself is the foundation of existence, what dreams might that consciousness be having that we have yet to perceive? Perhaps 3i Atlas carries not just a message from ancient times, but an invitation to remember what we have always been, conscious creators in an infinite game of cosmic hide-and-seek, temporarily forgetting our true nature for the sheer wonder of remembering it anew.